Welcome to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry. So it is a special pleasure for me to share this opportunity to introduce you to poets from our county in the flesh, as it were, as they read and discuss their work. Our monthly tapings will be broadcast on Marin TV and then become part of a special page on the library website, along with biographies of the poets and links to our collection. This is a partnership with the Marin Poetry Center. A common thread throughout the programs will be discovering how living in Marin has influenced their poetry. Those of you who love poetry will appreciate this direct transmission from the poet to the listener, you. Those who might think of poetry as esoteric or abstract will discover how it can sing when read aloud. For our second program, we will feature Gerald Fleming and Barbara Swift Brauer. We will feature Jerry Fleming first. He's actually Gerald Fleming. That's his nom de writing. But hi, Jerry.
Hi, Neshama. Thanks for having me. And thanks to the Marin County Library for sponsoring this. It's terrific.
It is terrific.
Yeah.
Well, since our common thread is living in Marin County, there must be a poem you have that has something of Marin in it. So give it to us.
I do have something that doesn't name Marin necessarily, but it occurs in Marin.
Okay.
It's called Colorblind. 29 days a month I'm happy with this minuscule disability, this sight so much better than myopia. I laugh with the others at my red grass, the green and brown cars blending into umber, the mismatched socks, such a minor impediment. But the one day scrapes at me. The morning when at breakfast from the window, by a change in shape I see the floribunda apple 10 feet away has opened into the reason it was planted, a pink explosion whose flowers I can see only singly and up close. Or later, from the car, that field of red maids which, the glow of late sun behind us, you turn to me and remark upon, and your lips, whose heat by God I know, form a perfect rose, stone gray in the distance.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
Thank you.
It's the duality of, and it's all encapsulated in there.
Oh,
so that's what I heard, and that's what I love. So how did you start writing poetry?
Oh, it's hard to trace it back for me, I think, but I think the first poem I wrote was in the 4th grade, actually,
Ooh.
a very, very long time ago. And I was doing a project in the 4th grade for a Chinese, a notebook on China. And I had to sew the pages together by hand and put copper in there for the copper that they mined, and you know, those things we did as kids. And I was supposed to draw something, but I'm a terrible artist, so I took a crayon and blacked out an entire page and then realized that I had destroyed this project. And on one side, on the other side of the page, I wrote, "The blackness of night is such a fright, the Chinese people go to the steeple to pray to the Lord without their bloody swords."
Wow.
Just tried to resurrect that project. And it was such an ignorant piece, of course. I was in the 4th grade, and you know, the Chinese people didn't have swords, but we were Catholic people then.
Yes.
And they didn't have steeples either. It's a Buddhist country.
Exactly. And anything goes in poetry.
Well, yeah, in that case it saved me. And I got a decent grade in it, and from then I went on to other things, I hope.
Yes, but I love the blackness and the color blindness. See how it links together?
Well, poetry came through for me.
Exactly. Well, before we talk more, I want to hear more poems from you.
Oh, okay. This is a poem that's in my first collection called Swimmer Climbing on the Shore, put out by 16 Rivers Press in San Francisco. It's called The Train. In a car, the dream is to arrive and extricate the body, sweating or shivering, there. The train, though, heaves through years. It should be silver or black, its ticket from one bright place to another, its cars not so crowded you cannot walk. Let's tell the truth. The train is not clean. The rubber floors of its aisles crunch, littered with shells of almonds dropped by yesterday's drunken soldiers. The train is a dream. My son wants white smoke sucked skyward, backward, pure smoke, white as his eyes, to surround us on this platform in billows sporadic and gone. I tell him the days of such stuff are past. The slow luxury's been surrendered forever. Now there's speed, urgency. That's too bad, he says, and in the dream we speak of the train as a dream. Mine is this. I read when I can, then get restless. The afternoon leans across the fields, shadowing the oaks. I walk from car to car, stop to stand and smoke a cigarette in the world between cars. There is heavy grease smell. I watch the coupling as the train comes to an easy curve, the springs distend, the balls roll in their sockets. Then the time has come, the dark has been laid down. I find the empty sleeping car and close the door, draw the red curtains, reach for the light, undress. I breathe 4 breaths into velvet, and she is there, she whom I have never seen. Her dark hands touch my neck. We breathe together now, and yes, it is possible that at a given moment the rhythm of our breath matches that of train and track. But it doesn't matter. There's light like molten iron in the east, and when I look down I find nothing. My body is blown away, flecked skin and bone fine as thistle seeds, out the open window toward my death 300 miles ago when we passed a town whose lights I thought were beautiful.
That's really, really exquisite. And what I love especially, first of all, it definitely sings.
I hope so.
Oh yeah, there's a kind of poetic voice that has a lilt in it. You know, some poets kind of speak like that, but yours is definitely lilting. But what I love especially, and you know, if watchers should know that this is the first time I've heard this, is the layering of grit and dream. And to take us, for all of us to know that our dreams are so fecund as possibilities for poetry.
Yeah,
and you've just made that link for us.
I think you can overdo it a little bit sometimes on the dream. Some poets write about dreams only, and it gets a little tedious sometimes. But I think that when you can integrate it into some real life experience, it's most valuable then.
Yes, yes, and I loved the kid in there, and the smoke, the way, you know, it's kind of like what you want a house to look like, you want a train to look like.
Right, it's a mythic sort of image, I think, that doesn't exist anymore, of course. But
exactly.
In the dream, my son wanted that.
I know, so. That's beautiful. Another one, please.
Another one. Here's one from this book called Finns on the Dance Floor, and Finns are people from Finland. They bring the forest with them, spruce at their shoulders, birch at their elbows, and whirl, the beer-heavy bellies. Good people on the loose, here from those big spaces, summer, butter days, and milky nights, all making the crossing to Stockholm, aiming their bodies here, this boat, this bar, this circular dance floor. Beware, Finns having fun, whirling to old Jackie Wilson tunes, to Elvis, spinning in utter safety, mosquito-free, belly to belly, big, oblivious, holding the white and fading light in their arms. Yes, beer, yes, music, yes, scent of skin. One more spin, and it's winter.
So much music in there. Did you actually see those Finns
Yes.
dancing? I mean, I could see them with you.
We took a trip with our kids, a 1-year trip around Europe many, many years ago when I had a sabbatical from public school teaching.
Wow.
And we made the crossing to Stockholm, and there happened to be Finns with us coming from Helsinki. So
yes, and they're glorious Finns.
The glorious Finns.
Yes, yes. Another one.
Another one.
I'm hungry.
Let's see. Okay. Here's a poem called Long Marriage that's appeared in various anthologies here and there. Long Marriage. You're worried, so you wake her and you talk into the dark. Do you think I have cancer, you say? Or were there worms in that meat? Or do you think our son is okay? And it's wonderful, really, almost ceremonial, as you feel the vessel of your worry pass miraculously from you to her. Gee, the rain sounds so beautiful, you say. I'm going back to sleep.
That's really, really lovely. And again, you start from such an odd slant into this expansion, which makes it so much fun.
It's anyone who's been in a long relationship recognizes this.
Oh, I know
Here,
it.
you take my worry, please. Thank you.
I know it
much.
very, very well.
Good, so.
Yes. More.
More?
Yes.
Maybe I'll read one or two from this latest book, Night of Pure Breathing, from a press in New York,
Okay.
Hanging Loose Press. These are prose poems. And I'll read the first, maybe, from this book called Casa de Ambivalence. It's possible to feel awful anywhere. You can be above a harbor, the water blue, the sky blue, one boat streaming in, a little generic warm wind, birds, etc., and think, if only I focus for a minute, do the numbers, I can average myself at least abject. You make up formulas. Your income plus your living situation plus that blue weather plus the mute pleasure of that lone boat in its white wake, divided by the cumulative suffering delivered by gunpowder, times the world's current population, times that number's exponential expansion, minus every molecule of mud blown skyward, and you enter in your sought-for negative number an abjection so deep you stand up and search the nearest dark drawer for a badge to turn in. After a few hours, you pull yourself up, out, venture into the fading light, decide to go to a club, careful not to consider the connotations of club, and you sit down and order a drink, steering your thoughts delicately, carefully not considering the implications of drink, and the music begins, stops, begins again, and a beautiful woman beside you spins on her bar stool and says, "Do you like the music?" And you weep into your hands just a little moment, recover, answer, "Do I like the music? This contrabass? This bandoneon? I'm wondering only how you deserve your skin, what I did to deserve the sight of this candlelight on your face, what your lips did to deserve their fullness, what we're doing here, listening to tango, when the rest of the world..." "You've said enough," she says. "Come with me and let's be miserable together. We'll build a house called Casa de Ambivalence. We'll wrap our bodies around each other. I promise to cry out in pain."
Oh, that's great. And again, it has that shape of
Oh, well, I hope so.
You know,
One
really.
hopes that poems open,
They
and then maybe
do.
sometimes they close at the end.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope
Oh,
so.
and all is legit. Yeah. So what I've gleaned from you is long marriage, a child, and another. And I know from our previous talk you have a daughter as well, and they are grown.
They're
Grownish?
They're quite grown
Quite
now.
grown.
Our son is 38 and our daughter is 33.
Whoa. Yes, and that are you retired or do you still teach?
I taught in the San Francisco Public Schools for 37 years.
Whoa.
And then retired about 5 years ago.
Congratulations.
So I've been retired. Thanks.
Yeah.
It was a good life.
Yes, we have a little time, but no, I want to find out what other poets you love, or which ones do you feel influenced your work?
Oh,
I mean,
the list is so long.
I know.
It can go back to Chaucer. It can go back to Sophocles.
So you love those classics
of
as
course,
well.
The classics, and then Gerard Manley Hopkins and Dylan Thomas and Sylvia Plath is.
Well, they're all in
still
there.
A favorite.
So that's what makes me very happy.
I think they're embedded in lots of contemporary poets.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, how do you, and obviously you love to read aloud, but I know poetry is a very inward process. So do you like to read at any chance you can get?
I like to read occasionally, yes. Any chance I get, I'd say no. I think I like to write a heck of a lot more than I like to read, but the whole process is of one whole cloth, I think.
I thought that was the equation, but I wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah.
We are rapidly running out of our segment, and I think I'll just thank you hugely for this fabulous pot of poems that you stirred around and that you lifted up for us to taste.
My pleasure.
It was just a joy.
A lot of fun, Neshama.
So
Thank you very
yes,
much.
yes, and watchers see how poetry lives. Marin Poets Live.
Voila.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And now for our second poet of our second segment, Swift Brauer. It's very important to get Swift in because she told me there are lots of Barbara Brauers, but only one Barbara Swift Brauer, and here she is. Welcome, Barbara.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and be part of this series.
Yes, we're so pleased. And since we're talking common thread, and we are in Marin County, give us a poem that puts us in your Marin County.
Okay, well, even better than that, perhaps. This is my front yard. It's called Changing Forecast. Look how the sun has emerged, despite expectations and the wringing of hands. A new warmth rises on the April wind. I am here again at the old crossroads, action at odds with intention, accomplishment sacrificed to the short-term pleasure of just being here. Is it so wrong to stop and reevaluate the day's agenda? If they will pay for the same work tomorrow, why hurry past this hour when it all begins to make sense? You and me, this unlikely house. Look, the weeds have turned into forget-me-nots, and we didn't kill the lemon after all. Come, sit beside me and listen. I swear you can hear the Bermuda grass growing, the oak shadows deepening, this old planet spinning on a new axis.
There we are in your yard, and in from, again, the very specific to the as global as you get in very few breaths. And that's one of the full joys of poetry. So let's have another.
Okay. This, again, is in the beautiful San Geronimo Valley. I've been a resident there for 28 years, and we enjoy hiking the ridges and each of the seasons. So the former poem was in April. This one is set in those beautiful golden days of late October. It's called At Ease in the Borrowed World. This is no solitary walk. They startle into view, enter by a jay screech, step out from the hunch of a boulder's shadow. Of course the dead return these last fine days, when we stride most at ease in the borrowed world. Today the autumn sky opens with an acorn's crack, and I set out for the ridge, leaning into the slope, the steady ache of muscle. Here my father's stern patience in a hawk's pivot, my friend's voice threaded in the wind-shaped branches. They have come to warm themselves in the late day sun and remind us of our promises. Ready to be taken in, the dead nestle in the nub of a rib, breathe with our breath, curl in our sleep against winter's lengthening nights.
Oh, that is so beautiful. It's so visceral. I love the hunch. And I love the fact that you're still walking surrounded by all this stuff. And in that we are just at the end of that season, it encapsulates it absolutely beautifully. So thank you.
It was originally named Days of the Dead because, of course, that's the holiday and the remembrance of ancestors.
Yeah, I love it. So tell me a little about where do your poems come from? How do they grow?
Well, they sort of announce themselves to me. I might be walking the ridge. I always bring paper and pen. I might be sitting, minding my own business, doing something else. Very often it's a phrase that occurs to me that somehow carries with it an emotional resonance. And if I'm lucky and smart, I just write it down. And sometimes it's a series of lines, and I just write until the thread runs out, till the energy runs out. And then when I have more time, I go back and try to complete the thought, try to dig out where the energy is, and therefore complete the poem. So there are two different halves. One is the literal inspiration, something just blows in, and the other part is trying to mine that for a complete poem.
Right. So there's a lot of nowness in the very first of it. Does your life give you these times to be open? Do you have ease in your life to let the stuff come? And have you bet you haven't always had that ease, if you have it now?
Well, ease is a very unusual word for my life. I'm a freelance writer and editor. So I am around paper, words, computers, most of the time. And that's why ridge hiking is so important, because there's sitting and then there's getting out and moving. So there's a lot of different styles of writing. or different evaluation of writing that I do.
Ah.
And so my poetry exists quite differently. I write newsletters, I work with authors on their books. So I have the opportunity to stop, turn, and write down a few phrases. But as I say, they come often too when I'm out in nature, walking, looking around. Your mind starts ruminating and bringing in these other emotions, other thoughts.
Right, so you're in a barrage of words.
That's
and
right.
so that takes considerable discipline to turn to soul work, which is what I think of as poetry. How about another one?
Okay. This is a return journey. It's a landscape of a different sort. 3 weeks dead, he refuses the verdict, wrests free his name from the unassailable pages, and begins the long way home. At the crossroads, he bends to soothe the three-headed beast, masters its fears, the gate swings open. This is how the dead walk out. See how he plies the oars, how surely he steers across the great river, back to the shore of the world. One by one, he visits the faces of his sons, remembers them unborn, fumbles at the locks of his luck, and cannot undo them. Farther and farther he goes, past the boundaries of our memories, to the early fields, the first praises of his name. Blank as a comet, a new desert, he stands unhoused among us, new syllables breaking on an eastern sky.
I love all the classical references in there. They're just, they make me tingle. And the trajectory of it into that great unknowing and the loss of what we know as connection. It's just a beautiful piece. Now, was it written for someone close to you?
It was a death in the family, yeah.
Yes, yes. And of course, all those big things feed poetry so well.
That's right.
Yeah. And help us through them.
Certainly do.
Yeah, yeah. Another.
This is also a fantastic landscape, but a little less somber, I guess. My mother and I rearranged the world. You first, I say, handing her the largest oceans. Reaching in past her elbow, she retrieves small whales and the wishbone of a sunken ship. Pull with me and make a wish. And I squeeze until the soft wood leaks seawater down my arm. Together we shift the priority of isthmus and strait, connect their jigsaw coastlines to form new routes around treacherous shoals, calm the wild waters of the Horn, delight to imagine the sailors safe in their ports. In forgotten hometowns, we take up the streets, pouring their contents onto the Formica table between us. You next, she says, and I begin writing the wood frame houses, picking them, placing them square on their foundations, finger briefly through the household goods, place the sleeping residents back in their beds, and fold the quick dark around them. We work through the neighborhoods, arranging crosswalks and vegetable stands, pause to examine the gathering places where children play until their names are called through the summer air, and they are off home again. We take all the time creation needs, not interested in copyright or the small byline left by inventors. Only the chance to say, ah, that's right. The reward of saying, isn't that fine?
Did were you writing poetry? Are your parents here or gone?
They're gone.
Yes, I thought so. Did they know you were a poet when they were?
Yes. My mother was not particularly, that was not her particular interest. My father, however, was the one who bestowed a love of poetry on me. I think that last poem arose from the fact that my mother wrote a book. It was a collection of letters of her great aunt. And I took on the sometimes